I can read and interpret data in a scaled bar graph. So what exactly is a bar graph? Well, a bar graph is a type of graph that uses bars to show data. A bar graph has a scale of equally spaced numbers that helps you read the number each bar shows. So let's look at a few examples of what a bar graph might look like. This is a bar graph showing the students' favorite after-school activities. This bar graph shows what kind of pets people own. And this bar graph shows birthday of students by month. So let's look at this bar graph. The students in the reading group made a bar graph to record the number of books they read in October. The title of this bar graph is Books Read in October. The title tells what the bar graph is about. Notice the bars. Each bar is labeled with a student's name. Max, Amy, Seth, and Kate. Now notice the lengths of each bar. The length of each bar tells how many books each student read. So just by looking at this bar graph, you can tell that Kate read the most books in October since the length of her bar is longer than Seth's, Amy's, and Max's. Now notice the numbers underneath. That is called the scale. The scale is 0 through 16. And it is by twos. And now that we looked at this bar graph, let's see if you can answer this question. How many books did Seth read? Well, to find the answer to that, what we simply need to do is find the bar for Seth. Well, here's Seth, and here's his bar. Where does it end? It ends right here in that line, and if we look down, it is the number 8. So that's the answer. How many books did Seth read? Seth read 8 books in October. So let's talk about the parts of this bar graph again. So, what is the scale for this bar graph? Well, the scale is right here. The answer is right here. The scale is 0 through 16 and by twos. The numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 are equally spaced on the bottom of the graph. Each space between the numbers counts for or represents 2 books. Why do you think it's important for the space between the numbers on the scale to be the same? Well, the space between the numbers represents the same amount. Now looking at the bars in this bar graph, how can we find the number a bar shows? Well, the same way we did it for Seth. Simply look at the number on the scale where the bar ends. So if we're looking at Max, how many books did Max read? Well, here's Max. Here's his bar. It ends on this line, and if we follow it down below, it is the number 6. So, Max read 6 books. How can we find how many books Kate read? Same thing. Look at the bar for Kate. It ends at 12, so Kate read 12 books. Well, we know that Kate read 12 books. Looking at this bar graph, can you figure out who read 4 fewer books than Kate? Well, we know that the scale is by 2. So if we count back, this would be 2, 4. So Seth read 4 fewer books than Kate. How many books did Amy read? Well, here's Amy's. Her bar ends here. Not quite at a line, but between 8 and 10. What number is between 8 and 10? Well, that would be the number 9, wouldn't it? 8, 9, 10. So Amy read 9 books. What if Amy read 5 more books? How would that look on this graph? Well, let's see. So if we shade it in to 10, that would be 1. Then 2 more would be 3. 2 more would be 5. So this is what her bar would look like then, if she read 5 more books. And that would equal out to the number 14. Now let's look at 2 more bar graphs. These 2 bar graphs show the same data. How do we know that? Well, for one, let's look at the title. Remember, the title tells you what the graph is about. They both say favorite winter activity. You'll also notice that the data is the same. But they do look different. One is a horizontal bar graph and the other is a vertical bar graph. In a horizontal bar graph, the bars go across from left to right, just like this bar graph. And the length of the bar shows the number. So for example, how many students actually chose ice skating as their favorite winter activity? Well, there it is, 20. So this is an example of a horizontal bar graph. This other bar graph is a vertical bar graph. And in a vertical bar graph, the bars go up from the bottom. The height of the bar shows a number. So we saw in the horizontal bar graph that 20 students chose ice skating as their favorite winter activity. It shows the same data in this bar graph, except for the bars are going up from the bottom. And notice that it is also 20. So how are these 2 bar graphs alike? Well, they're alike because the graphs show the same data. How are they different? Well, the bars on the horizontal graph go across from left to right. And the bars on the vertical graph go up from the bottom. Now let's look at the scale. Remember, the scale is the numbers. What does each space between the numbers represent? Well, let's look. It goes from 0 to 4 to 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28. And the same in the vertical bar graph. So what does each space between the numbers represent? Well, it represents 4 students because we're counting by 4s. Do we have to use a scale of 4? No. We could definitely use a different scale. But in this case, the scale is 4 students. So in this lesson, you learned how to read and interpret data in a scaled bar graph.